things off at number 10, we got Michaelann Goodrich. Back in 2018, 32-year-old Michaelann pretended to be a homeless 15-year-old girl named Rowley Madison in order to enroll in classes at an upstate New York high school. Under a 1987 law, the school district had to enroll her as a student because she claimed to be homeless, even if she didn't have the proper documents to support her age. An investigation revealed that she already had a high school diploma, so no one really knows why she enrolled in high school a second time. She rode the bus every day to Cairo-Durham High School until one day when she didn't show up for school and teachers became suspicious. She was eventually arrested in December of 2018 in Cairo, New York, and faced charges of offering a false instrument for filing, falsifying business records, and criminal trespassing. Yes, in case you wanted to know, it is illegal to pretend to be a child. At number 9 on our list, Sidney Bouvier, Gilstrap-Portley. Sidney was a 25-year-old man and Hurricane Harvey refugee who was caught posing as a 17-year-old playing basketball at Hillcrest High School in Dallas, Texas in 2017 and 18. The reason? He wanted to relive his glory days as a high school basketball all-star. Sidney played basketball for North Mesquite High School before graduating in 2011. He was caught posing as a 17-year-old after a North Mesquite coach recognized him at a tournament. That's awkward. How did he not think that would happen? Apparently while he was posing as a 17-year-old, he also dated a 14-year-old. That's illegal. And it's also illegal to pose as a student. He pleaded guilty and received 6 years probation for indecency with a child and record tampering. It turns out that Sidney also had a young child and a fiance while he was doing this. His father at the time said, I quote, "He made errors. There was no ill intent. We apologize for that happening. It was mischanneled determination. His passion is basketball. He tried to push rewind in his life." Side note, parents always see the best in you, don't they? At 8 on our list, Charity Johnson. Back in 2013, 34-year-old Charity Johnson pretended to be a high school sophomore for almost an entire school year before she was found out. She attended New Life Christian School in Longview, Texas, and lied about being 15 years old for 7 whole months. She was arrested in June 2014 when she flashed a fake ID to police under the fake name Sharite Stevens after they were called to an apartment she was staying in. Her excuse was that she was abandoned by her family and only looking for love. She said, I quote, "I'm just a normal person like any other normal person, trying to pursue her education, get her education, and make it through life and be a better person." The principal at New Life Christian School told the press she acted like a 15 or 16-year-old girl. She was an attentive student, did her homework, but still, Charity Johnson was given an 85-day prison sentence. At lucky number 7 on our list, Artur Smarin. Artur Smarin was a 23-year-old Ukrainian man who went by the name Asher Potts so he could enroll in high school in America. The reason? His visa ran out. Artur came to the United States when he was 18 back in 2012 under a short work visa through a Ukrainian university. He flipped burgers at Red Robin in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he also befriended a couple, Stephanie and Michael Potts, who agreed to adopt him so he didn't have to go back to the Ukraine. This sounds familiar. The Potts asked Smarin to shave 5 years off his age so he could be adopted by them, and also get benefits from the government. Police said that he stayed in the US after his visa expired and even managed to get a hold of a social security number and a passport under his fake name. He was also an exceptional student and had a 4.16 grade point average. I feel like most of us would do better in high school the second time around though, don't you think? Anyways, Smarin's relationship with his adoptive parents took a bad turn. They physically abused him if he didn't do their household chores, and they threatened him with deportation. Eventually they went to the police in his last year of high school, calling him a foreign terrorist that planned to shoot up his high school. They are actually making a movie out of this true story, and Ansel Elgort is gonna play him. In at 6, Guerdwich Montimere, another basketball player. Guerdwich pretended to be a 16-year-old boy when he was actually 21, all because he wanted to play basketball in Texas. He pretended to be a Haitian orphan and went by the name Jerry Joseph. He played on the Odessa Paramount High School basketball team in 2009. He actually showed a lot of promise by the year 2010 and was on track to become a college basketball star. He even convinced the school's head basketball coach Danny Wright, who liked him so much he put him up at his home. But yet again, Guerdwich was recognized at a tournament in Arkansas by his previous coaches. And then it all came out. Guerdwich was charged with falsifying documents and also sleeping with a 15-year-old girl who thought he was only 16. He was eventually released from prison in 2013. Halfway there now at number 5, Brian Michael Rini. 24-year-old Brian made headlines in 2019 because he told police that he was a missing boy. Timothy Pitson, who went missing from a Chicago suburb in 2011 when he was only 6 years old. Brian told the police he was 14 years old when he was really 24, and that he was actually the missing boy. He said he escaped kidnappers in Ohio and was missing for 8 years after his mother committed suicide. His identity ended up being released after the FBI's DNA test results confirmed he wasn't Timothy Pitson. In fact, he had a criminal record dating back to 2013 and his DNA was already in the system. That's awkward. Brian was charged by the FBI for making false statements to a federal agent and could face up to 8 years in federal prison for his stunt. No one knows why he made up the story though. That's still a mystery. At number 4 on our list, Taylor Markeith Smith. Back in 2011, it was found out that 22-year-old Taylor pretended to be a teenager so he could play football at no less than 13 different schools across Texas. I will let that sink in. 13 different schools. Jim Ledford, football coach at Berkner High School in 2011, said that Taylor Smith told him he was 16 when he tried to enroll at Berkner in 2008. He also said that his parents had passed away. Police believe that Taylor tried almost everything to play high school football. Some schools let him in without question, and then in other instances, Smith brought in a fake district caseworker when he tried to enroll. That is some dedication right there. Many of his coaches said that he seemed like he would be the next star player, but he was pretty much a con artist who would disappear right before he was found out before moving to another high school and trying the scam again. In at 3, Frederic Bourdin. 23-year-old Frederic is from France and he managed to convince an American family that he was their missing son, Nicholas Barclay, who disappeared from his home in San Antonio, Texas back in 1994. Nicholas was only 13 years old at the time. Frederic went to Spanish police 3.5 years after Nicholas Barclay went missing, stating that he was the missing teen. His story was that he was abducted, taken to Europe, and abused by a notorious pedophile ring before he managed to escape. The Barclays bought the story, they flew to Spain, picked him up, and took him back to the US. Frederic Bourdin managed to fool a heck of a lot of people. The Barclays, the Spanish police, and the US consulate, even though he didn't look anything like the missing boy. So why did the Barclays agree to take him to the US? Well, there was actually a documentary made on Frederic Bourdin, and it makes the claim that the family had ulterior motives. Bourdin was exposed as a notorious con artist and is now known in France as the Chameleon. He spent 6 years in prison for pretending to be Nicholas Barclay. In at 2, a man who is only known as Sea of Ash. Pretty much as soon as he started the school year at Stokes High School in Suffolk, England, students and parents began to complain about a 6'1" man with stubble and an Adam's apple that was attending classes. He wore glasses, but they weren't prescription. It turns out that Sea of Ash was born in Iran and he was forced to flee the Middle East before arriving in the UK. He claimed asylum and said that he and his brother were 15 and 12 years old. The school didn't look into the accusations made by students and parents because they believed that they were racially motivated. Now, Sea of Ash didn't really do anything inappropriate, but ultimately he was exposed after authorities found out he was posing as a child in order to take advantage of the British free education system. This case actually forced Britain to make it a lot harder for asylum seekers to fake their age. And at number 1, Natalia Barnett. You knew this was coming. The person who inspired this top 10 list. Natalia Barnett is from the Ukraine and she has a rare form of dwarfism, so no one really knows how old she is. She's at the center of an adoption scandal right now. She was adopted by an American family, the Barnetts, who believed she was between 6 and 8 years old in 2010, but the Barnetts slowly started to see clues that she was a lot older than she said she was. She had periods, full pubic hair, and medical conditions only adults can be diagnosed with. Natalia also started being violent toward the Barnetts, who legally changed her birth year to 1989, making her 30 years old today. Natalia now lives with another family, the Manns, who believe that she's a teenager, but the Barnetts are facing trial on charges of neglect.
At number 10, we got H Rodreick II. This man was arrested in 2007 for pretending to be Casey, a 12-year-old boy who is described as shy and an average student with chronic attendance problems. The reason for his arrest? He was under investigation in 3 different states before he was apprehended in Arizona and charged with failing to register as a sex offender on more than one occasion. He also had a large database of inappropriate pictures and videos of minors, among other disturbing footage of him and a minor. If that's not enough to make your stomach turn, this scumbag was living in a home with 3 other men who pretended to be Roderick's grandfather, uncle, and cousin, and were all convicted sex offenders and predators. At number 9, we got Areola-Hernandez. 24-year-old Hernandez was arrested in 2014 and sentenced to 10 years in prison and a lifetime probation after she pretended to be a teenager to try to engage in sexual acts with underage boys. She would pose as a 15-year-old girl and use apps such as Facebook, Keek, Snapchat, and Tango to get in touch with the underage boys, with some being younger than 15. When asked, she admitted to preferring younger boys rather than men, but didn't explain why. I hate people so much, guys. And at number 8, the father of a 13-year-old pretending to be his child, but he had good reason to do so, and I'm actually extremely happy he did. After the father of this 13-year-old saw the messages 29-year-old Brandon Ruff was sending his child, the father decided to take matters into his own hands. The minor's father went as far as inviting Ruff over to their home. Ruff was under the impression he'd be meeting the 13-year-old he was initially speaking to, but was surprised when the minor's father answered the door. At that point, Ruff was held by the child's father until police arrived to apprehend him. Ruff was later charged with false informing, child solicitation, among a couple other charges. charges. At number 7, Jonathan Elia Nicola. The 29-year-old South Sudanese man enrolled and played for a Windsor, Ontario high school basketball team, and when he was caught, he admitted even he didn't know his age. According to Nicola, whenever he would ask his mother how old he was, she would say she doesn't know. What's even crazier is how it all happened. Nicola arrived at Pearson International Airport in Toronto on a student visa to attend Catholic Central Secondary School in Windsor on a full scholarship. According to a spokesperson for the school, they don't offer athletic scholarships, so no one really knows who paid for it in the first place. On top of this, Nicola was only caught because when he applied for a US visitor's visa to play basketball with the school, presumably against American teams, the US Border Services Agency alerted the Canadian border that this man's fingerprints matched that of a former failed refugee claimant with the same name but a different age. So good job, Canada. At number 6, we got Patricia Dye, a 31-year-old woman who pretended to be a 14-year-old boy named Matthew Abrams so she could have a relationship with a 16-year-old girl. If this isn't already bad enough, Patricia's parents actually defended the 31-year-old daughter. Ralph Dye, Patricia's father, claims the victim knew she was a girl. The family lives together in a motel, and Dorothy Dye, Patricia's mother, denied the claim that Patricia and the victim slept in a van together. She argued nothing ever happened and that Patricia slept in the same bed with her, not the victim. I think they're missing the bigger picture here that a 31-year-old pretending to be 14 is still extremely illegal. Coming in at number 5, we got Robert Hunter. Now this guy takes sick to another level. Hunter pretended to be Justin Bieber back in 2013 while on Facebook, Skype, and MSN, and typed to speak with his victims, claiming his microphone on his webcam wasn't working properly. He most likely used some fake videos of Bieber to lure them at first, and when the victims became suspicious, he allegedly threatened to tell their parents after he filmed them doing what he asked them to do. Sure, you can figure it out for yourselves, but if you guys need any help, this guy is a disgrace to the human race and should be locked up forever, if you get what I'm saying. He was sentenced to 14 years after admitting to the charges laid against him, and hopefully word gets out of what he did while he serves time. These types of guys never do well in prison, if you get what I mean. And at number 4, we got the Riverside Cops. I know, cops pretending to be kids seems kinda weird, right? Well, think of it like a real life 21 Jump Street, because that's exactly what happened. A total of 25 students were arrested from 2 separate high schools for selling a range of drugs from marijuana to cocaine and even some prescription pills. Of those arrested, only 2 of them were adults, 18-year-old Serena Ramirez and 19-year-old Eric De La Cruz. All the others were taken to juvenile detention halls, and what's even more interesting is that no one on campus knew about the operation until the day before the arrests. According to Jonathan Greenberg, who is the superintendent of the high school district, only 3 district officials knew about the investigation, so I'm sure the teachers were just as surprised as the students when they saw a handful of their classmates get taken away in cuffs. Coming in at number 3, Justin from Mississauga. This one hits close to home because I live 20 minutes from Sauga. That's what Toronto mans call it. Sauga. Anyway, this guy has been considered a vigilante of sorts. Going only by Justin, the 28-year-old construction worker by day pretends to be a minor on dating websites at night, where he lures men trying to meet up with him, assuming he is indeed a minor. He poses as both a boy and a girl, and sets days and times to meet up with these suspected offenders across the greater Toronto area. It started when he posed as a 13-year-old girl named Jennifer just to see what would happen. One man drove nearly 2 hours to meet with him, assuming he'd be meeting 13-year-old Jennifer. After that instance, he felt sick and heartbroken someone would actually do that, which inspired him to continue luring these guys so he can expose them. When they show up to meet the minors they think they're meeting, Justin films them and posts the footage on social media to expose them. Some of his confrontations have even led to arrest. So keep up the good work, Justin. At number 2, 20-year-old Ethan. That's what he goes by, and for good reason. He tricked a cop into believing he was a 16-year-old girl, and the cop still wanted to hook up with him, or I guess her as far as the cop was concerned. Using the gender swap filter on Snapchat, Ethan set up a profile on Tinder, pretending to be Esther. When Esther got a message from Robert Davies, a 40-year-old San Mateo police officer saying, "Are you down to have some fun tonight?" he decided to roll with it. They started talking on Keek, which is when Esther said she was 16, knowing that Tinder requires you to be 18. When asked if Davies was okay with that, the cop responded yes, even though the age of consent in California is 18. After 12 hours of messaging back and forth, Ethan had enough evidence to submit to Crime Stoppers, which led to the arrest of the now former officer. And in at number 1, Gemma Barker. This 19-year-old woman disguised herself as 3 different boys and was dating 2 girls while pretending to be a boy. Online, she created the identities of Aaron Lampard, Connor McCormick, and Luke Jones, who all had their own Facebook accounts, emails, and phone numbers. Barker had real-life relationships with 2 16-year-old girls and duped them by wearing beanies and baggy clothing to hide her gender. She even went as far as meeting one of the victim's parents, who also fell for the disguise. Barker was eventually caught when one of the suspects thought the boy she was dating looked a lot like the boy the other victim was in a relationship with. The craziest part of the story is Barker actually knew the 2 16-year-olds before she disguised herself as a boy and started taking them out. Barker was sentenced to register as a sex offender, released on bail, and is being treated for her psychological disorder.
Coming in number 10, Casey Garcia. A 30-year-old mother from Texas was arrested and charged after she decided to perform a social experiment at her daughter's school. Casey recorded and posted the video herself that shows her dressing up like her daughter and then sneaking into the school. Shockingly enough, no one even noticed that she had spent the entire day at the Garcia Enriquez Middle School campus. All she had to do really was wear a mask and have her daughter's student ID, and boom, she was in. She even directly spoke with security and faculty members, all of which addressed her as her daughter, which is just mind-blowing. The stunt was done to prove to the school's principal that it was not safe yet for their kids to begin attending in-classroom learning. After coming back from a long time of remote learning, Casey feared for the worst when students came back, and turns out she was kinda right. But unfortunately, she had to sacrifice her own freedom to prove this point. Now she faces charges for criminal trespass and tampering with government records, despite the police coming to her home to act upon an outstanding traffic warrant. Coming in number 9, Audrey Francisquini. Audrey was a 28-year-old woman who posed as a high school student in order to get more followers on Instagram. Once inside the school, she began handing out flyers telling people to check out her Instagram page, and as a result, she faces charges of burglary, interfering at an educational institution, and resisting an officer without violence in connection to the incident. According to the prosecutor, they explained how Audrey made her way into the school and said she was carrying a skateboard, a painting, and she dressed similar to students to try and blend in. The woman was caught after she initially told security that she was looking for the registrar's office, but then ended up walking past the office and standing in front of a classroom door instead. The arrest report reads that the woman blocked the entrance to the classroom, and that's when she began handing out those flyers with her IG handle on them. Security tried to confront the woman, but she ended up walking away and refusing to stop for them. Thankfully, her social media posts and multiple eyewitness accounts from students were enough to have her arrested at home later that day. Coming in number 8, Anna Hernandez. Most of these will be messed up stories, but this woman from Glendale is something else. Anna was sentenced to 10 years in prison and a lifetime probation after she was caught attempting to engage in, let's just say, inappropriate acts with underage boys. Hernandez, who was 24 at the time, would also be required to register as an offender. She was arrested on March 20th, 2014 and actually pled guilty to all of her charges. The mother of one of the victims said that Anna had purchased alcohol and introduced her son to drugs, plus was a professional stalker by the time that she had even contacted her son. The woman's defense attorney tried to argue that this incident stemmed from her client having a history of trauma and untreated mental illness that contributed to her inability to form healthy relationships. The woman had been catfishing boys under the age of 15, hoping to meet up to engage in these illegal acts, often posing as a 15-year-old herself according to the court records. Coming in number 7, Artur Samarin. Back in 2016, this 25-year-old man posed as a high school student so that he could follow his dreams of staying in the US to study at a prestigious university. He was exposed after his foster parents and co-conspirators turned him over to the cops though, telling them that he was living his life under the fake name of Asher Potts. Upon getting arrested, he was charged for attempting to fraudulently acquire a US passport, and much like our last person on this list, was also charged for trying to get freaky with people who are not of age to consent. And I have to say it like that because YouTube will shut this channel down if I say that he was having sex with a minor. Catch my drift? After getting caught posing as a teen, he was jailed and then deported back to the Ukraine. The wild thing is that this plan had initially been hatched way back in 2012. The Potts actually adopted him under the condition that he would change his age from 19 to 14. This would then allow for him to be adopted by them, and it would also give the parents a payout from the Social Security Administration and attendance tax benefits. Although it became obvious to his classmates that he had a 5-year head start on them when he began getting straight A's and winning numerous accolades. Coming in number 6, Frederic Bourdin. Nicknamed by the French press as the Chameleon, Fred claims to have taken on as many as 500 false identities over the course of his con artist career. Born fatherless and with a distracted mother, Bourdin began creating new identities for himself and impersonating orphans as a way of getting attention. He was almost caught as well back in 1997 when one of his stories began to unravel. However, he soon assumed the name and identity of a missing American boy named Nicola Barclay. Even though he had a French accent and didn't even have the same eye color as their son, the family still bought into his tricks. Without question, the family brought him over to the United States and even enrolled him into classes. The adult was caught posing as this long-lost teenager when an investigator working for the show called Hard Copy interviewed the family. They had only stopped by to learn more about the remarkable reappearance of their long-lost son. Unfortunately for Frederic, this investigator started to notice way too many discrepancies. Fred was then sentenced to serve 6 years in prison for deception, only to return to Europe and continue to impersonate orphans. Coming in number 5, Patricia Dye. Dye was arrested in June 2010 after police found a 16-year-old runaway girl malnourished and with sores on her feet wandering the streets of Franklin, Ohio. The girl said that she had been with a 14-year-old boy named Matthew Abrams, who authorities later determined was a then 31-year-old Patricia. Prosecutors alleged Dye pretended to be the 14-year-old boy in order to develop an ongoing dating relationship with the girl, even getting to know her family and friends. Similar allegations surfaced with other girls as well, but none led to charges being filed. Patricia was indicted by a criminal grand jury and ultimately convicted of misdemeanor charges. Coming in number 4, Robert Hunter. No, not Robert Hunter from the Grateful Dead. This Robert Hunter was actually caught trying to pose as Justin Bieber, believe it or not. Or believe it or not. This creep though was by far one of the most deplorable human beings on this planet. Not only did he trick girls and boys into sending him lewd photographs, he also blackmailed a lot of people that tried to back out from his disgusting requests. Teens believing that they were speaking with Justin Bieber were essentially doing anything and everything that this man asked of them. Luckily, he was caught after a girl from Tasmania informed the police. Officers ended up finding 800 videos from all over the world, with some in the video being as young as 9 years old. Detective Sergeant Paul Higgins of the Cleveland Police Department told the courts, "Robert Hunter was a calculating and malicious predator who set out to coerce and bully young girls into exposing themselves over the internet. He ended up pleading guilty to 15 charges of inciting these teens and kids to create this indecent content." Coming in number 3, Taylor Markeith Smith. Now this story is at least a bit lighter in comparison to all of the deplorable ones that we've heard thus far. Smith, who was a 22-year-old adult from Texas at the time, actually tried to trick more than a dozen high schools into letting him join their football team. The 6'5", 245-pound con man approached schools under different names, always with a different story. In one tale, his parents died in a car crash, and in another, they died in a fire. A former high school coach who was fooled by him said that upon hearing his story, he really just wanted to help him out. Although Taylor's teammates were suspicious from the start. Even though his identity continued to change, the thing that remained consistent was that any time the school needed paperwork from him, he would just run off and do the con all over again. Smith dropped out of high school in 2006, and when he tried to re-enroll under his real name, he was advised to earn his GED and try a junior college. Coming in number 2, Sidney Bouvier, Gilstrap-Portley. Sidney, who was 25 years old at the time, served no jail for posing as a 17-year-old hurricane evacuee to enroll in Hillcrest High School, nor did he spend any time behind bars for his behavior with a then 14-year-old girl. Gilstrap took on the identity of Rashawn Richardson during his time at Hillcrest and played on the basketball team until a coach from North Mesquite High, his alma mater, recognized him in April of 2018. What's wild is that no one in the school even noticed he was pulling one over on them. He had been a significant part too of the Hillcrest Panthers season in 2017 to 2018, and the district's high school coaches even voted him Offensive Player of the Year. At the same time though, the child that he had dated while attending the school also believed that he was 17. Mae Mullen Milton, the attorney representing the child Gilstrap-Portley dated at Hillcrest, said that her client has had to move and change schools, adding, "I have a client, a child, who is suffering emotionally still from this, who is suffering mentally still from this, and who may have long-lasting impact from her dealings with Mr. Gilstrap-Portley." Last but certainly not least, in our number 1 spot, California cops. Back when marijuana was illegal in California, the Riverside County cops were doing some really weird things to catch teens in the act of smoking the devil's lettuce. Several times Riverside cops actually pretended to be high schoolers so that they could arrest students for pot. Under the controversial undercover drug investigation program, officers spend all day at local high schools pretending to be students, and over the course of a semester would try to build trust with their underage classmates. Once the trust had been built, they would arrange drug deals with a few dozen students and then arrest all of them. On December 12, 2013, officers arrested 25 students from Paris and Paloma high schools for allegedly selling illicit drugs. According to students who attended these schools, they said that all this did though was make them super suspicious of their own peers and teachers. The LAPD started this undercover high school drug sting decades ago, but discontinued the program in 2005 when school officials noticed that special needs kids were increasingly getting busted, mainly because they were much easier for the police to manipulate into committing these illegal acts.